Malawi calls itself the warm heart of Africa. But that heart has been heavy, affected by HIV and AIDS. Malawi has one of the 10 highest rates of HIV infection in the world.
My husband died of AIDS, and I am HIV positive.
About 12% of all Malawian adults are infected with HIV. But even those who are not infected cannot ignore the impact that HIV and AIDS are having on every aspect of life in Malawi, including the loss of agricultural workers and the resulting increase in poverty and malnutrition.
You see families now are spending a lot of time attending to their sick loved ones or attending funerals, or they are sick themselves, so that there's nobody to go out and till the land.
As part of the quest to improve food and nutrition security, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization has been working with governments and other partners for 20 years to mitigate the impact of HIV and AIDS on the agricultural sector. But this cannot be done without acknowledging another factor, that of inequality between men and women. Mary Mangola is one of the faces behind the HIV and AIDS epidemic. Mary lives in a rural village in southern Malawi. She, her husband, and her 15-month-old son all are HIV positive. And although Mary has tried to avoid getting pregnant again, she says her husband doesn't cooperate.
I really wanted to avoid getting pregnant again, and the doctor advised against it. But the problem is my husband. When we have sexual relations, he says he's going to use a condom, but then he doesn't. So here I am, pregnant again.
There are a number of drivers that are fueling the epidemic. Amongst them is this issue of unprotected sex between men and women, particularly, casual sex as well as concurrent partnerships. Then we have our own cultural issues, and the gender balance between men and women is impacting negatively on the women than on the men. About 56% of those living with HIV are women. And when we look at the age bracket, 15 to 24, there are 4 times more girls that are infected with HIV than boys of the same age group. So it's affecting more girls.
Just as social and economic differences between men and women influence the spread of HIV, they also can limit a woman's capacity to produce food and income, to maintain a nutritious diet, to protect and own personal farmland and other property, and to conserve natural resources. This, in turn, puts the entire community at a disadvantage. Mary Mangola's son Yanko developed malnutrition. He spent 3 weeks recovering in this Nutrition Rehabilitation Unit, or NRU, in the district of Balaka.
In 2005-2004, we noted that 54% of all the malnourished children admitted in the Nutrition Rehabilitation Units were HIV positive. There is a very close link between food production, malnutrition, HIV, and AIDS.
While providing care and high-protein mixes to undernourished kids, the NRUs have gone a step further with the help of FAO and funding from the governments of South Africa and Spain. FAO began a training project for children's parents, showing them how to cultivate vegetables and provide the food variety needed for better nutrition. FAO then gave them seeds and tools to start their own gardens at home. It made a difference for Esnatum Chiwi's grandson.
She's just saying that the vegetables are really improving the health of the the kid who was admitted at the NRU tremendously. And also, the vegetables also improving the health of the newly born baby.
Not all children have this kind of support. The AIDS pandemic is destroying the basic fabric of the Malawian family, leaving children especially vulnerable to poverty and exploitation.
Malawi estimates about 1.2 million orphans, and 45% of those orphans are due to HIV and AIDS. So indeed, there's a growing crop or a growing population of orphans. This is again a secondary epidemic that we are seeing in the country, not only in Malawi, but in this part of Africa.
The fabrics of extended family are getting weaker and weaker. Hence, we see orphans and orphanages.
Before, we didn't have street children, but today we have. What will be the future? How can we assist them?
Maggie Hara is an orphan from a rural village. She was abandoned before being brought to a rehabilitation home in Lilongwe. When Maggie's grandmother could no longer care for her, she moved to the capital with her uncle. Maggie says her uncle sexually abused her, left her pregnant, and then her aunt kicked her out of the house when she found out about the abuse. Maggie miscarried after 7 months of pregnancy. She was 14 at the time. Maggie is in a safe place for now, but social workers say girls like her are doubly vulnerable to the effects of HIV and AIDS. An orphan and a female, she is at higher risk of poverty, malnutrition, and circumstances that could lead to HIV infection or make it difficult to stay healthy if infected. If Maggie and her generation are to escape the vicious cycle of poverty and HIV infection, it will be vital for them to acquire agricultural knowledge, valuable life skills, gender-equal attitudes, and the confidence to make a living.
Malawi is largely dependent on agriculture for its general livelihood. And we feel that there has to be a succession plan and there has to be transfer of knowledge from the older cadres to the younger ones to realize that for them to thrive and for them to continue and sustain their livelihoods, they should have some elements in terms of knowledge of agriculture.
FAO, with funding from South Africa and Spain, is tackling the vulnerability of orphans and other children, preparing them to become more self-reliant in the future. The Junior Farmer Field and Life Schools initiative aims to empower children from affected communities by giving them the agricultural and life skills that under normal circumstances they would receive from their parents and other relatives. These school-based programs are designed to give vulnerable youths hands-on training in all aspects of farming, from land preparation to harvesting, while improving their nutrition. Students also learn how to process crops for food and income, and how to use their creative skills to make other products that can be sold at the market. The children also learn to develop their own educational tools, theatrical skits like this one on HIV and AIDS, which they can then perform for their own community, sharing the skills they've learned. The combination of both practical and creative life skills helps to build their identity and personal confidence, qualities that are harder to come by now that children are losing so many adult role models. In Malawi, where agriculture employs about 80% of the workforce, the loss or illness of adult family members has also placed more women in the position of fending for themselves, and this in turn is placing greater stress on natural resources, especially Malawi's forest cover.
There is a greater dependency on forest resources than ever before, mainly because due to loss of household income, loss of a breadwinner in the household, there's that drive now to make the remaining members in a household to actually engage in activities like charcoal production for income, as well as firewood. The figures that we have in terms of forest loss for the past decade stands at 2.8% per annum. And really that translates in about 50,000 hectares of forests that we are losing every year.
90% of the population uses primarily wood and charcoal for energy. Small stoves made out of mud are helping vulnerable households to use less than 1/4 of the usual amount of firewood, reducing the depletion of surrounding forest cover.
The mud stoves have really assisted them much because this area, as you have seen, previously the forest was so thick. But now, because of the crowding of the people and the issue of selling the firewood to the lake, they have started cutting the hills.
The mud stoves are one element in a project jointly operated by FAO, UNICEF and the World Food Programme. The German-funded project is designed to improve the food and nutrition security of vulnerable children, including those affected by HIV and AIDS, by addressing agricultural, environmental and social needs at the same time.
There are a lot of female-headed households here than other areas because culturally, one man can marry even 4 women. Now, when they have married those women, they can just support one wife. Others, they just assist themselves, but they can bear children to those wives. So they don't be assisted by the husbands.
As the head of the household, I have a hard time getting enough food and clothing for my children. Normally, to make money, I go up the hill to gather firewood and sell it by the side of the road.
Single mother Leka Robeni now spends less time gathering firewood. Leka received training as a teacher and volunteers at a free nursery school, which allows other parents in the community extra time to work in the fields. When she's not teaching, Leka uses FAO-provided fertilizer and other agricultural inputs to produce more crops for food and income. FAO also provided livestock and other agricultural inputs like pest and weather-resistant metal silos. People learned how to make the silos and mud stoves themselves, developing an alternate source of income. They also received training in crop diversification and water conservation techniques. Encouraging protection of natural resources and sustainable rural livelihoods was a common thread running through 2 FAO projects made possible with funding from the government of Norway. One project trained farmers in better soil and water conservation methods and stressed the importance of planting seedlings on a regular basis to replace trees cut down for their wood. Another project focused primarily on fishing and forestry. FAO provided technical expertise and policy development assistance to the Malawian government in its efforts to incorporate HIV and AIDS and gender issues directly into Malawi's national strategy for managing natural resources. The strategy focuses on a wide range of issues, like the need to educate people about the spread of HIV in the highly mobile fishing communities, and the fact that women, who are most likely to suffer from a loss of access to equipment, income, and therefore food insecurity, are forced into transactional sex to put food on the table. The government is also facing its own HIV-related staffing shortages, which make it even more difficult to train people in sustainable management of natural resources. Access to land in Malawi is crucial to women, who make up 70% of Malawi's full-time farmers. Yet women are more likely to fall victim to property grabbing, having their land, homes and other belongings taken away when their husbands die. FAO embarked on an innovative campaign to protect the property rights of women and children. Stivelia Chata says her husband's body was still lying in the mortuary when his relatives came to take away the keys to her home.
They told me that everything in the house that I shared with my husband was their property, not mine, because they were my husband's relatives. I was very upset and I didn't want to give in, but they pressured me and told me to leave so that they could take the house and everything in it.
Property grabbing was occurring long before the HIV crisis, but it has increased with the frequency of people dying at a relatively young age from AIDS. A Norwegian-funded FAO project provided support to the Malawian government in its efforts to amend the country's wills and inheritance legislation to protect surviving spouses and orphans from property grabbing.
Today, we are trying to look at the issue of what goes in a will and what does not. There have been a lot
At the same time, FAO worked with a local radio broadcasting network to develop a series of programs to inform citizens about their rights and to stimulate debate among people like these community members.
When the man dies in a family and most of the property is given to the woman, the relatives on the side of the man will not agree with that. They'll say, no, he was our brother, we deserve to get a bit of it. When you are dying, you need to say, I'm leaving all my property to the children. Maybe one or two things to your relatives. Because the thing is, if you don't do that, the brothers and the uncles, they will come and grab all the property from the woman. So in the end, it's the woman who suffers.
Most of the women, they are not aware of their rights. But even those few who are aware of their rights, but they're not able to enjoy their rights because of the situation they are in, either because of poverty, because of ignorance, or because of they are dependent on their husband, even if they knew about their rights, but they could not fight for their rights.
In a country where many rural women and men are illiterate, face-to-face communication and hands-on training are crucial.
I think there's great improvement. I think the challenge that we have is sustained positive behavior change. The knowledge levels are quite high. People are aware. People have seen people living with HIV. But I think behavior change is a hallmark of the response to HIV and AIDS.
That response must include social and economic interventions designed to promote long-term and sustainable food security. The HIV and AIDS epidemic has altered life for this nation of 13.2 million people. But it also has inspired action to address social inequities that affect food security and to brighten Malawi's prospects for the future.